All right, welcome to our mini lesson from Alyssa Mueller and Nathan Weiss.
All right, so our course is a fifth grade science class, or an earth science section of the fifth grade science class. Our instructional goal for the year would be to inform students about the space around us and how its properties and functions contribute to all of life. And our content standard that we are doing it on is develop a model to describe the interaction of geosphere, biosphere, hydrosphere, and or atmosphere.
So to do that, we wanted to start with the biosphere. So by the other lesson, we were hoping that students will be able to create an accurate representation of the environment for a specific animal. And then with research that they did themselves, they would be able to demonstrate what is needed for an environment to be habitable by many different species.
So the characteristics of our student learners are, so they're early adolescents, fifth graders, so they're beginning to think abstractly, but they're still mostly in that black and white, concrete thinking, so everything's either right or wrong. As a fifth grade teacher, it's part of our job to start guiding students to start thinking abstractly. And then they also tend to be more self-conscious and shy. So it's really important to try not to embarrass them, and that might scar them for life and that kind of thing. So just being conscious of that. They also have shorter attention spans, so long, boring lectures probably is not going to get across to them. It doesn't really work for college students, let alone fifth graders. And then they tend to seek acceptance from peers and others, and their social interaction is very important for them. So doing group work and, again, trying to limit, I guess, as I said previously, try not to embarrass them in front of the class and call them out and that kind of thing. They also tend to be pretty hormonal. They're going through puberty and that kind of thing, so keeping that in mind as well would be important.
So what they need to know is what an environment is. So we really want to make sure they know what that is, because you can't really design one without knowing what it is in the first place. We want to talk about and remind them, and then expound upon what environments need, because they should know at this point what shelter and water and food is needed, and that is required for an environment. They might not know about humidity and stuff like that. So remind them. We want to first remind them of stuff that they should already know, and then move on into the more complicated stuff, so then they know everything they'll need for their project in the project, all the information they need for the project. And then we also need to help them figure out what are the specific animals that they're going to be using, and what those animals specifically need.
All right, so the skills part of our task analysis is how to research. So that wouldn't be full-blown research that you do in high school and college. It's more knowing what important information to pull out of a text. And then the ability to combine multiple elements for an environment. So can they visualize and think critically about what that needs to look like? And organization is going to be important for building an environment, like what needs to go where and that kind of stuff. And of course, how to work in a team. With those characteristics that I described earlier, that social interaction part is very important, and now would be a really good time for them to learn how to work in a team, how to be a leader, and that kind of stuff.
So for task analysis of reasoning, we want them to be able to prioritize what's required. So if they have a certain amount of space and they use that space, and they're like, well, we don't want to add shelter because that take up space, we want them to be able to reason through the fact that you would rather need shelter than have the perfect amount of space, because if you don't have shelter, animals could feel uncomfortable sleeping and stuff like that, and that's absolutely required for most animals. Or food is obviously required, even if it takes up space. So we really wanted that to realize, get them thinking about priorities, what is absolutely necessary first. This also takes spatial reasoning because obviously you have a limited amount of space, and so you have to be able to put everything in there, and you have to know what's like. You have to be able to think about sizes, otherwise things are going to get too crowded, or you're going to have so much empty space that you could probably have shrunk it down. So it really focuses on that spatial reasoning, and humidity and temperature regulation will take some reasoning as well. Not by the fact that, it needs to be like 100 degrees, but how do you get it to be 100 degrees? Like, we obviously have heat lamps and stuff like that, but that might not work for every household. Humidity can be controlled, especially humidity can be controlled in several different ways. For instance, a tortoise can be controlled through having water in their cage, even if it's not necessarily required, giving them baths, spraying them with water. So there's a lot of different ways to control humidity that you'd have to reason through and see which one is the best for your animal.
All right, so our sequence of instructional activities starts with, we would ask the students as a whole group to recall what an environment is, what is needed for an environment, and how temperature affects us as humans. So we could give them a scenario as in, what do we wear in the summer versus what do we wear in the winter, and start relating that to how temperature would affect animals and plants as well. And then we would ask to see if they know what humidity is. All of these questions allow us to assess if students have the background knowledge needed for the activity that we will be doing. If they don't, it gives us the chance to explain all the concepts needed to do the activity.
So we want to work with the entire class first. That way everyone has a chance to get hands-on with it, and so they're not going into an entire project without any information whatsoever. So we wanted to start with the entire class working through an example. So, for instance, what kind of environment does deer need? They need like trees and stuff like that, obviously. Work on a list, and then we'd work on that list with the class. And then after we're done making that list, the teacher would help guide the class in making a picture for that theoretical deer that we're talking about. So that way they have a better idea of what the project will entail.
All right, so next we would split the class up into groups. We would have 5 different groups for 5 different types of animals, and we would assign each group to a typical household tank animal and hand out the materials for the corresponding groups. So we would already have articles and information pamphlets picked out for them. We would provide them with poster board and all that kind of stuff, so they have everything they need to do the activity. They have their materials for research and stuff to draw it out with.
So next we'd have the students as a group use the resources to make a list. That would include temperature and humidity, as well as all the other things necessary for the animal, such as food, water, and shelter. And then each student would write down their list and hand it in as an exit slip. So then we actually know everyone is doing what they need to do. And that would be individually, so it wouldn't be like one group hands it in. Every kid would have to hand it in, so at least they're listening and trying to provide for their team. And then on the same paper, each student will create basically a blueprint of what their environment would look like, and use spatial reasoning and organization to then help construct that image on the back of their exit slip.
All right, so with their blueprints and their lists and everything, they would put all their ideas together to create their tank and environment on the poster, and they would label all those different elements. This will help them learn how to collaborate and understand how to put everybody's minds together to focus on how they're going to put it into one project. And when everyone is done, students will present their poster to the class. So this will give the chance for students to see how other environments work. Say one student has like a ball python tropical animal and somebody else has animal that lives in the desert. They'll be able to learn about all the different environments, and they will also learn how to confidently present their poster.
I guess the list and blueprints will allow us to determine if each student was participating, as well as if each student understood what is needed for a habitable environment. The poster will give us the same information, but will also help us see if some students were contributing more than others, like they would present their ideas or not. And it will also allow us to see how students are working together and how they are socializing.
All right, and that is the rest of our mini lesson. Thank you for listening.